And that brings us to today. Now, today we have so much grass in this one country that if we were to combine all of the sod grass lawns in the United States, we would have about as much land as the state of Florida. Yes. Ding, 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 ding. An alarm bell rings. Now, it's actually easy for us to imagine this, right? If we look out this window right there, we see the grass. Imagine your entire state, no roads, no houses, just grass. That's how much grass we have in this country today. It's quite a lot. It is our number one most irrigated crop by far. Number two, a distant second, is corn. Number one most irrigated crop is this thing we call grass. And meanwhile, we already know the other aesthetic that we could be embracing this whole time. This whole time, even when I was at HGTV, I knew landscapes like this existed. I just ignored them. Aren't we all kind of ignoring this? We're saying this is the landscape for, a crunchy granola type. We, as normal Americans, we just like a nice grass lawn. And I felt this too. At the time, I was designing for American suburban homeowners, and I would put down grass time after time again, ignoring this very current and existing other aesthetic. And instead of this, I was putting down grass. And so as part of my mea culpa, I would like today to share with you a few alternatives. Why not? And those of you who are buying the book today will get this little booklet that says, here are 15 Florida-friendly alternatives to grass. We're going to go over a few of them today. Okay, so first of all, white clover. Is white clover a native? No is correct. It is not. And yet here is this guy saying he's all about natives, pushing the white clover to you. Why do you think I'm doing this? Do you know? Get rid of grass. Done. It is the perfect gateway native. You know how there's gateway drugs? This is the perfect gateway native. It's not a native. It's the perfect gateway plant to let someone try something other than grass. Why? It stays low, just like grass. You want it to stay low. Clover will stay nice and low. If you feel like mowing it, and some of us are addicted to mowing, what can we do for them? Nothing. They are beyond help, but we have to accept them into our lives. If your husband or your neighbor loves to mow, let's let him mow. But instead, let's mow some white clover. It comes up with beautiful white flowers, which, and this is why it passes for me, even though it's not a native, pollinators love it. If a pollinator loves your plant, I say let it happen, right? If we're so lucky enough that a pollinator, a bird, a bee, some butterfly is actually appreciative of this flower that's appeared in your yard, I say keep that flower. And that's why I love the white clover as the gateway plant for people who are just so stuck on grass. Because we have to give them alternatives, right? We can't just tell our friends and our neighbors to feel bad about what they're doing to the environment. We have to give them an alternative. And so I feel like this is one of the easiest ones. Another one, this is Bermuda grass. Exactly. Death knell. Bermuda grass, thirsty for water, has all sorts of pests and diseases. It's just an unfriendly, it creates such a matte carpet that it allows no other plants, no sunlight to hit the soil, no nutrients to be allowed into the soil. It sucks up any amount of water that you give it. Instead, why don't we use the sunshine mimosa? I hear little claps. I have one with me. I have a question. Who out there has a lawn that is willing to put this in one corner of their lawn? The first hand, I'm coming over there and I'm giving this to you, ma'am. This is a sunshine mimosa, the most adorable of plants. Where are you? You raise your hand. Thank you so much. Please plant this. Okay, she knows where it's going. Perfect. The sunshine mimosa, why do we love it? First of all, check out that purple flower and tell me you don't love that thing. If you even read Dr. Seuss as a child, you're in love with this flower. More importantly, it is low-lying. So for all of those HOAs that have height restrictions on what you can plant for your ground cover, this meets that restriction. Now, let me say that again, because this is in the book, and it's maybe the most important chapter of the book. A lot of HOA rules don't specify plants. Instead, they specify heights. Why? Because the people on that board don't know anything about plants, and they know something about heights. So they'll say, you know, you can only have a 7-inch tall lawn, quote unquote, but they don't specify what that lawn is. If you're lucky enough to be in a homeowners association that doesn't specify plants, know that we're looking to you to lead this movement, because you have all the leeway that you need to start incorporating native plants as long as they meet those height restrictions. And this plant does. It stays low. Each small frond that gets a little tall droops down and then builds further roots. So one single plant will spread out in multiple directions. I've had people push back on the sunshine mimosa and say, it's too aggressive for me. I don't like it that it takes up my planting beds. Well, guess what? This is exactly what we want as native plant lovers. We want an aggressive native plant that is going to outcompete non-natives. That's the beauty of this plant, by the way. If you surround it with other natives, it lets them be. It really tries to take over plants that aren't naturally accustomed to this area, which, by the way, the perennial peanut is not a friend of Florida. I know. I see shocked faces out there. I know. I only started knowing this because I noticed this beautiful yellow flower out there. I'm like, gosh, what is this gorgeous thing? And they say, oh, it's the perennial peanut. Even the name sounds lovely. A perennial peanut? Lovely. No, this is native to South America. It is considered potentially aggressive. Now, I say potentially because the research is still being done. But while we're waiting, let's ignore the peanut. Let's instead embrace this beautiful purple flower called the mimosa, and forget the peanut. Let's leave the peanut up to the medians of our highways, because that's really, it's going to be hard to change the mind of the Florida state. But we can change our minds very quickly tonight here and say, we don't need this peanut in our lives. We're instead dealing with actual natives that will do well with our pollinators. Okay, another grass alternative. This is, I think this is St. Augustine that we're looking at. Another super thirsty, heavily disease-ridden plant, and practically a vine. Instead, why don't we consider the Florida Betony? Now, Miss Betony is leggy, which gives her a lot of critics because people don't like super tall plants. But I find that when we start really thinking about how we're going to redesign our properties, we can no longer just think of just, you know, ground cover really close to the ground, and then shrubs, and then trees. We have to think of all different levels of planting. And this is where I think Florida Betony steps into the role, because you're going to need some kind of middle ground between your shrubs and your ground cover. And this is where the Betony comes in. Another great reason to love Betony is if you accidentally step on her or break off a twig or a leaf or branch, more will propagate just from that clipping. So it's a very durable, very hardy native plant that happens to have beautiful light lilac flowers. And edible, yes. What are those things called underground? That tubers, are they tubers? Okay, great. I was calling them tubers until now, but I actually have an expert here. So the Florida Betony has these tubers underground that look like rattlesnake tails, kind of like a little bumpy thing. Kind of gross to think about, but don't worry about it. They're delicious. They taste like water chestnut. So plant some Betony, and if you grow snackish, ready to go. And the final plant I want to mention here is the muhly grass, which everyone knows and loves. I just find it so beautiful. Snaps for muhly. It's so beautiful. And part of the beauty of the muhly grass is the seasonal aspect of it, where it looks like one thing in the spring and summer, and it's something completely different, almost diaphanous and floaty in the fall and winter. So one of the beauties of designing with natives is you really get to express your personality in 100 different ways. Every time I see a different landscape planted in the natural style, I'm impressed, because it shows me a completely different personality. On the left, we've got the turnip seed residence. These are all pulled from the Florida Native Plant Society website, by the way. Awesome resource. And the turnip seed residence was basically a homeowner that said, I've got this fantastic property. I'm going to incorporate 100 native plants and try to make it not look too disjointed. And this is what they created. I love that sort of self-challenge that they gave. The other one is the Cressida residence, and they went with a much more natural look, like, let's just see what grows. Let's put some seeds, let's put some plants, and see what happens. And I love both of these looks, one highly controlled, one a little bit less controlled. But in both cases, an instance where the homeowner gets to express their personality to the highest extent. And this chart on the bottom basically is a reminder that says, all of my advice aside, you have to find the right plant at the right place. That means knowing what your soil type is, knowing what your sun and shade exposure are, and just talking with maybe your local nursery to make sure that the decisions you've made for your property are going to be the ones that let your investment work, rather than having to replace plants over and over again because you didn't bother to look at the soil type.